Alright, now let's move into something more advanced, how to properly read the D1 and D9 charts together using a structured Parari approach. First, we need to understand one core principle before anything else. Think of it this way. The D1 chart shows the event, what actually happens in life. The D9 chart shows the strength and dharma, how strongly that event manifests and the quality behind it. Classical teachings emphasize that Vargas, like the Navamsa, refine the promises of the D1 chart. So if something is clearly shown in D1 but weak in D9, the result gets reduced. But if D9 is strong, even an average D1 placement can improve significantly over time. Now let's go planet by planet and build a full system. We start with the Sun. The Sun represents ego, authority, father, and overall life direction. First, you look at its house lordship from the D1 Lagna. This tells you what area of life the Sun controls. Then you examine its placement in D1, what house it sits in, what sign it occupies, and its dignity. This shows how the ego expresses externally. Now comes the key, its placement in D9. This reveals the true inner strength of identity. It tells you whether the confidence is real or just projected outward. It also plays a role in how ego functions within marriage. So when you combine everything, if the Sun is strong in both D1 and D9, you get a natural leader with stable authority. If it's strong in D1 but weak in D9, the person may appear confident but struggle internally. If it's weak in D1 but strong in D9, the person develops strength later in life. And if it's debilitated in D1 but strong in D9, it can behave like a Nicha Bhanga, hidden strength emerging over time. Next is the Moon. The Moon governs the mind, emotions, and adaptability. In D1, it shows your emotional reactions and mental state. But in D9, it shows your true emotional maturity, how your mind stabilizes over time, especially in marriage. So a weak Moon in D1 but strong in D9 suggests emotional healing later, often after marriage. But a strong Moon in D1 and weak in D9 can indicate emotional instability developing later in life. Now Mars. Mars represents energy, action, aggression, and initiative. In D1 it shows where you act, fight, and assert yourself. But in D9, Mars becomes refined, it shows whether your energy turns into discipline or destruction. In terms of marriage, Mars in D9 also reveals conflict style and sexual behavior. So, strong in both charts means controlled power. Strong in D1 but weak in D9 can lead to anger issues in relationships. Weak in D1 but strong in D9 indicates inner courage that develops with time. Moving to Mercury. Mercury rules intellect and communication. In D1 it shows practical intelligence, how you think and communicate in everyday life. But in D9, Mercury represents higher intelligence, wisdom and refinement. So the key idea here is simple. D1 Mercury is skill. D9 Mercury is wisdom. Next, Jupiter. Jupiter governs dharma, wisdom, knowledge, and expansion. In D1 it shows your role as a teacher, guide, or advisor. But in D9, Jupiter becomes extremely important, it reflects your true dharmic strength. In fact, classical teachings consider Jupiter the main significator of the Navamsa chart. So if Jupiter is strong in D9, the person's life is guided correctly. If it's weak, even with knowledge, the person may make wrong decisions. Now, Venus, one of the most critical planets, when combining D1 and D9. Venus represents love, attraction, marriage, and pleasures. In D1, it shows attraction and romance. But in D9, it shows the actual reality of married life. This gives us a very powerful rule. D1 Venus is attraction. D9 Venus is sustainability. So if Venus is strong in D1 but weak in D9, relationships may start strongly but fail after marriage. If Venus is weak in D1 but strong in D9, marriage improves over time. Next is Saturn. Saturn represents karma, discipline, delays, and life lessons. In D1, it shows where struggles happen. But in D9, Saturn shows spiritual maturity gained through those struggles. So a strong Saturn in D9 indicates controlled karma and wisdom. A weak one shows frustration and repeated delays without learning. Now the shadow planets Rahu. In D1, Rahu shows obsession, desire, illusion and ambition. But in D9, it reveals the true karmic direction of those desires. So if Rahu is strong in D1 but weak in D9, illusions eventually break. But if it's weak in D1 and strong in D9, unusual success develops over time. And finally, Ketu. In D1, Ketu shows detachment and past life mastery. In D9, it shows spiritual evolution. So a strong Ketu in D9 indicates deep spiritual insight, while a weak one can create confusion and unhealthy detachment. Now comes a very critical step, house lord analysis. Here's how you do it. First, pick a house, for example, the 7th house. Then check its lord in D1. Where is it placed? How strong is it? Next, check the same lord in D9. Is it strong or weak there? Finally, combine both to arrive at a conclusion. And this leads us to a universal formula. The final result is always the D1 promise multiplied by D9 strength. Now, an extremely important concept, sign transformation. You track how a planet changes from D1 to D9. For example, if the Sun is in Libra in D1, which is debilitated, but moves to Aries in D9, where it is exalted, the meaning is very clear. Externally weak, internally strong, leading to success later in life. So for every planet, you follow a step-by-step process. First, identify its house lordship in D1. Then see its placement, house and sign. Evaluate its dignity. Check its sign in D9. Compare the shift. Judge whether strength improves or declines. And then apply this to marriage and overall life direction. Finally, let's conclude with the master rules. First, D1 without D9 gives an incomplete judgment. Second, D9 always refines and corrects D1, it never replaces it but it modifies the outcome. Third, if a planet is Vargottama, same sign in both D1 and D9, it becomes very powerful. Fourth, if a planet is debilitated in D1 but strong in D9, it shows hidden strength. And lastly, if a planet is strong in D1 but weak in D9, the results become unstable over time.